So as Bill mentioned, Westchester will continue to develop into an important innovation hub and magnet for new and established businesses. And the reason is simple. There's a number of reasons. But New York City is 15 to 20 miles away, a 35-minute commute. We're next to the greatest city in the world. And New York City is out of affordable commercial and residential space, and Westchester offers an attractive, accessible, and practical alternative. We offer the kind of housing, lifestyle, and workplace environment that's in demand. Frankly, Westchester is looking more like New York City every day. Westchester cities rival Long Island City, Jersey City, Hoboken, and Brooklyn. And our rapidly growing urban centers offer outstanding transportation, culture and arts, education, diversity, and recreation. But let's put Westchester in context. Most people don't realize how large Westchester County is. We've got about 1 million people. For my Trivia Pursuit geeks, Westchester is larger than 6 states. We're larger than Delaware, South Dakota, North Dakota, Alaska, Vermont, and Wyoming. I would suggest that there's more professional firepower in this room of 250 people than can be found in a half dozen states. We have 6 cities, 4 of which are major urban centers: Yonkers, New Rochelle, White Plains, and Mount Vernon, Yonkers. Yonkers' population of 200,000 people or so is comparable to Scottsdale, Arizona, Boise, Idaho, and Richmond, Virginia. Our cities are embracing smart growth. Principles for smart growth are transit-oriented development, sustainability and preservation, housing that's affordable, cities that are walkable, and with proximity to jobs. Westchester has 14 colleges and universities, 3 major train lines, 42 stations, delivering a pipeline into New York City. And most recently, Westchester has also developed into a $15 billion biotech life science hub. 5 years ago, the Westchester County Association launched the Blueprint for Westchester. It provided a roadmap for what the county needed to move forward in the midst of a recession. We showcased Westchester's real estate to site selectors and developers from all over the region. Again, for those real estate geeks in the room, most of the featured properties in White Plains, Yonkers, and New Rochelle are now under development. We help culture and coalesce the healthcare and biotech sectors into a $15 billion economic engine. And we successfully advocated for new master plans, promoted adaptive reuse, and rezoning in the county's commercial areas. We worked with the business community to identify what was needed to begin building a talent pipeline for high-demand, high-skilled jobs. But the crisis of the recession doesn't demand the same priorities today. To stay competitive, Westchester needs to do many things. That's why the County Association has unveiled their focus now with a blueprint for smart growth. That's right, the blueprint for smart growth. It's channeling its efforts to leverage the extraordinary transition taking place in our country and our county's economy, because technology has revolutionized everything. Market disruption is everywhere, data is king, mobility, speed, and sustainability are key. The office of tomorrow is not the office of today. We need super fast connectivity, interior space designed to support biotech and research, flexible workspaces, and we need to be sensitive to the attracting and developing the millennial workforce that wants open and easy collaboration. We also need better mass transit, east-west, north-south, and better intercity transportation. Today, as Bill said, today is a new day. We have a tremendous opportunity. That's why we've convened this conference. In the next few hours, we will present to you an incredible group of experts. from around the country and around the world who will share their wisdom. They will tell us about the big picture trends, give us a lowdown on the challenges they faced as they built their innovation hubs, and they're going to show us an interesting rapid transit option and explain how to fund dreams. Throughout the day, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. They've set up 2 microphones here, so during the course of the presentations, we'll ask folks to come on up and use those microphones. Now I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Dean Whittaker. Dean is the president and CEO of Whittaker Associates, a dynamic analytic company that provides targeted marketing research and trends analysis using predictive analytic algorithms to real estate, economic development, and corporate clients. He served as the director of the Center for Entrepreneurial Resources and Applied Research at Ball State University, and was the former managing director of industrial development for the state of Illinois. And I'm also happy to report I have my first lead today. Deed mentioned to me that they have a 5-person office in Kathmandu, Nepal, and he needs a site selector to go over there and do some scouting. So please join me in welcoming Dean Whittaker.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you so much for the honor to be here today. I'm really humbled by this audience. I've looked around, I've looked at the registration lists, and I'm just amazed at the leadership that's shown up today to think about the future. How many of you have children? How many of you have grandchildren? How many of you have great-grandchildren? Today is really about them. It's about the future. It's about their future. And that's what we're really trying to do today. We're trying to think about their future and where they're going and the kind of world that we're going to help create for them along with them. I think it's a very interesting time in our history that we're taking a look at, I say looking around corners. It's really, what do you see coming? So much of our time, 85% of your time is spent doing tactical things. You're working on day-to-day, you're working on stuff that has to get done today or tomorrow or this week. 15% of your time might be, 14%, is thinking strategically. What should we be doing rather than what are we doing? So you have that issue. So about 14% of your time, 1% maybe gets spent on thinking about the future beyond 3 years, right? Beyond 3 years, maybe 1%. There's an article I read in preparing for this talk about the 5% challenge. The 5% challenge is try to spend 5% of your time thinking about the future beyond 5 years. The issue is we need to anticipate the problems, not try to solve today's problems, but try to solve next year's problems. What happens is we're always trying to catch up if we're trying to solve this year's problems. How do you go about finding out what next year's problems are going to be without taking the time to think about the future? So my intention today is really 3 things. I'd like to really encourage you to think about the future. I want to take you through a process, becoming future smart, is what I hope when I get done with my remarks today, we're a little wiser, a little smarter. I want to talk to you a little bit about a steep process, kind of a how to do it. And then I want to talk about a few of the trends happening. And so those are some of the things I'd like to cover. But as we started talking about jobs, and I'm going to take a little risk, kind of like Bill just took, I'm going to let you do a little talking at your table first. And your assignment in the next 10 minutes, not much time, 1 minute apiece, what was your first job? How did you get the job? And how much were you paid for it? What was your first job? How did you get the job? And how much were you paid for it? And this is really taking it to think about jobs and work and where they come from. So 3 assignments. We're going to do this in 10 minutes or less. So starting now. First job, how did you get that job, and how much were you paid? Part of the reason I did that is because what I think is really important to you in Westchester County is connections, and that's connections with each other. It's about leadership. It's about really connecting the community together. You need each other. And what I see happening is a community problem. And part of that community problem is how do you connect with each other? How do you connect and realize the common nature that you all have, the common needs that you all have. And you have city by city by city. I work in an area in western Michigan. We have 152 units of local government. Do you know what that means when you have 152 units of local government? You do know, don't you? Yeah, you do know what that's like. We're trying very hard not to be Los Angeles on the lake, because we have regional problems that we have to solve that don't lend themselves to local jurisdictions. So we're trying to solve problems on a regional basis. And in Michigan, we have township government. So we have another layer on top of that. So we have municipal governments, but we also have township governments, which make it even more complex, because now you have every township board and every township planning commission making decisions that affect the whole region. And so we've started out with something called the Strategic Alliance, which is an effort to coordinate and set up a coordinating body for the common issues that we're all facing, like transportation, like you are, and some others. So we've really tried to address that issue, and we're struggling, to be honest. It's hard to get people to realize that they have to cooperate and collaborate together. The blueprint that you've created helps do that. It helps create a common focus that you can all realize that's in your mutual best interest. Bill almost gave my presentation, so I mean, you were very kind to do that, but I want to fill in a couple things that you didn't talk about, but I just want to say well done. I travel all over the country and talking to different groups, and what I see happening here is maybe one of 5 or 10 that I've seen in the country that are really thinking about the future. Most are doing the strategic game. They're doing strategic planning stuff. They're not thinking beyond 3 years. They're really stuck in the moment and not thinking like you are. And hats off to you, Bill, for your organization's leadership in making that happen. You're spot on with your healthcare initiative, and I say that because I'm a baby boomer. I'm at the front end of the baby boomers. I'm standing on titanium and ceramic hips. So just to know, there's 78 million of me headed into that healthcare system that's ill-prepared for us. So you see what's coming up next is that healthcare system. Right now, my cardiologist went back to school and came back as a wellness coach. Does that tell you anything? And so it's all about keeping you out of the system is what we're trying to do. And that's really about wellness. And that's where we need to get to. But unfortunately, our insurance companies are still geared to pay for fixing things that are broken. And so we really have to look at a systemic system, including our insurance companies and how they compensate for wellness. I want to talk about three futures. You have really 3 futures. There's the possible future, which is everything that's out there, everything that you could do or everything that you could be. The probable one, kind of where you're headed now, kind of what I see at least where you're headed now. And really the preferred one, which is really your blueprint. Your blueprint is what I see as your preferred future for your area. It's what you're trying, that's where you want to end up, or that's where you want to be. And I know that you notice there's some lines there. Where we are today will determine where we end up in the future. And it's the decisions we make today that determines the course. I'm a sailor, which is another thing Bill didn't know. I'm a sailor. I've been a single-hand sailor for probably 10 or 15 years. I sail a 34-foot sailboat. Usually I have a friend of mine on his 36-foot sailboat that's nearby for safety, but single-hand sailing, when you start out, when you leave the dock, when you leave the harbor, 1 degree difference will make a huge difference in where you end up on the other side of the lake. So you want to think about setting your course today is now, but where you end up, what course you choose to take will make a huge difference where you end up. So think about that in terms of picking your future. There are really 4 forces that are really driving trends, and these are coming from a book by Cecilia Summers called Think Like a Futurist. And if anyone want a good read, I would recommend the book to you because she really gets you into the thinking about as a futurist would think. But the 4 forces are resources. Have you ever realized that all wars are fought over resources? If you go back and think about the origin of warfare, it's always been about resources. You're sitting on, and actually flowing through here, is one of the largest resources that's most in demand. You know what that is? Water, right? You're sitting on a large body of water. What else are you doing? The water for New York City comes through Westchester County, from what I've read. Is that true? Now, let me think about this for a moment. So now Wyoming has no income tax, no sales tax, no personal income tax, but they have a severance tax on coal, right? What if, now don't get excited here, what if you had a severance tax on water? I see Bill's going, just wondering, if you want to start a war, put a severance tax on water. Think about out west, wars are fought over water, aren't they? So look for resources. So that's one of the drivers behind change is resources, look for resources. Technology is the other driver, and I think that's the one I'm going to dwell on most today because I think it has the biggest impact on all of us. And we'll go into that in a little more detail. But one thing about technology that I've noticed is we way overestimate it early, right? Flying cars, anyone got a flying car yet? No flying cars? What? Come on. Somebody surely has a flying car by now, don't they? No, we don't yet, right? So we way overestimated the early technology, but we're going to have self-driving cars already do, right? And so we're way underestimating what autonomous vehicles are going to look like and what they're going to do to our economy and to ourselves. How many truck drivers do you think will be displaced by autonomous trucks? Lots. Millions. So all of that is happening right now. That's our technology. The other area is demographics, and I want to talk a little bit about your demographics and specifically the areas I'm concerned about. I've looked at by age cohort the layers of ages within your county, and I see two gaps. One is the age from 0, maybe it's less than, I don't know what 0 looks like, 0 to 10. That age cohort is down 3%, and that's in a 5-year period. So that's from 2009 to 2014. That age group dropped by 3%. The other age group that's dropped is the age group from 35 to 45. In that same time period, dropped 7%. Now, why is that significant? Well, that's your workforce of the future, number one, and that's also your prime income earners, number two. So then I went back and thanks to my friends that invited me to be here today, I started quizzing them and said, why? Why is that happening? Well, one reason I'm given, now you probably know better than I, but one reason was it's because of housing cost. You can't afford to live here. And the second reason I heard, how many of you have children living in your basement? Anyone have children living in their basement? All right, a couple of you do, yeah, all right. It's because of them, right? You finally got tired of them living in your basement and then you threw them out of the house and they left the county, right? So the issue is age, right? Can you afford to live here if you're 30 years old? How much money do you have to make? Your average house here is $600,000 for crying out loud. How much money do I have? Well, Bill could tell me. How much money do I have to make to buy that house, right? Third, right? About a third of my income. So housing cost is one of your biggest hurdles to get over. I have a weird idea, and I haven't talked to Bill about this one, but what if you converted some of those office buildings into millennial dormitories? Now that sounds like a weird idea, and maybe somebody's already doing it. But the idea is kind of that shared common living space, inexpensive rooms off to the side. Millennial dormitories, on a commuter line. That'd be pretty cool. So demographics is one of the drivers behind change, and that's one to keep an eye on because that's one which is a hard trend. That's one we don't change. We're not going to do away with the baby boomers. We're here now and we're aging, and that's one of the trends. And governance, which many of you know a lot more about than I do, and it's how do we govern ourselves. And how do we manage the group resources and the people and the tools that we have? That's what governance is about. And those are the areas I think are also a challenge. It's how do you learn to collaborate when you've all been structured to compete? So it's really about how you learn to collaborate is going to be the key to the success of this county. And so that's one of the areas I think that is most critical for you is collaboration and figuring out how to do that. And some of our other speakers today will be addressing that issue as well. There's two kinds of trends. There are hard trends. These are things that are inevitable. These are things that are going to happen. Think about aging. Hard trend, soft trend. Hard trend, right? Well, we think anyway. Ray Kurzweil out of Google is working to try to change that, right? He's trying to come up with a live forever an approach to things. He's working on uploading his consciousness to the internet. He said by 2029, our lifespan will be unlimited. How old do you want to live to be? Anyone have a preference? I'm thinking about my wife, and I'm 120 years old. I'm going to think about that for a minute. Anyway, hard trend, aging. Soft trend, subject to change. Those are the things that are subject to our behavior. The cool thing about a soft trend, we can shape the future. We can shape what's coming down the road, so something to think about. This next slide is your homework assignment, and this is a take-home. It's not a take-home test, but it's an approach that I learned taking a class at the New North Center for Design and Business. And what this is called is STEEP. It's a way of looking at trends. And it's a way of looking at them from the standpoint of social, technological, economic, environmental, and political trends, and over time, 0 to 3, 3 to 5, and beyond 5. I've done this as a group exercise at a 3-hour workshop. I could never get anyone to think past 3 years. Anyone able to think past 3 years? Really hard to think past 3 years because we don't practice it, we don't do it all the time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those trends kind of individually, and then we'll come back at those. Aging, we've already talked about. How walkable is your city? I'm getting to the point where I'm slowing down a little bit in my pace, right? My titanium and ceramic hips don't want to go quite as fast as my original model did. So it takes me longer to cross the street. How walkable is your community? How walkable are your cities for an aging population? Something to think about. I went to Mumbai, India, and I figured out why there are no old people in Mumbai, India. You can't get across the highway. I mean, there is so much traffic. Well, you know, if you've been to India, you know, it's a pretty scary place to try to cross the road. I think we're having increasing health concerns naturally as we age. I think the increase in fear of technology, and I'm kind of in between. I've tried to be a technology advocate all my life, and now I'm starting to get scared, along with Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking, both of whom have written letters about their concern about artificial intelligence and where that ends up. What happens when the computer becomes smarter than we are? And it's predicted by, again, my buddy Ray Kurzweil, that's going to be in 2045, the computer will exceed us in intellect. And so we're going to be seeing some things happening in the meantime that could be quite concerning. And climate change, of course. These are all things we already know about. These are social things where I'm not telling you anything you already don't know about. But the good news is you're in the high ground here. And topography, right? You're on the high ground, right? You're not on the low ground. And so you're going to be having to see things happening in New York City with levees being built to protect the city. So you're going to be seeing some really costly infrastructure be needed as the climate continues to change. So it's going to really change the dynamics of the area in terms of the severity of the storms coming through and things that are happening. We're seeing some things coming out. I have a lot of friends in Oklahoma City right now, and I worry about them. They're kind of like on the bullseye of tornadoes and golf ball size hail and all kinds of stuff. So I worry about them. Technology. Anyone knows what Moore's Law is? Anyone familiar with it, Moore's Law? We got a couple people. The Moore's Law is the idea that the power of the computer doubles every 18 months and the cost goes in half. And that has been happening for 40 years. Do you realize that? For 40 years, the power of the computer has been doubling every 18 months and the cost of it has gone in half. Where does that take us? That takes us to this. That takes us to the technology on our cell phone and beyond. You know what's after that? It's going to be little nanobots that are going to be injected, right? And we're going to continue that evolution of the Moore's Law. And so that's one of the things that I think is helping to create a different environment. It allows us to develop new technology. One of the interesting things about technology is technology builds on technology. And that's why this issue, we're seeing an exponential rate of change. What that means is it's not linear, folks. It's changing at an accelerating rate. Anyone kind of feeling that tension around your technology? Anyone taking a technology break? Anyone leave their cell phone at home today? What? You all brought your cell phones? Why? I mean, we're in a conference. You're not going to be looking at your email, are you? Come on, I know better. Anyway, again, the exponential rate of the change. Again, we way underestimate what is going to impact us early on. We way underestimate what it's going to do long term. Pick a technology, pick the iPhone, pick any technology. Early on, bag phone, right? We're lugging those things around. Later on, now we got a phone in our pocket. How many of you would agree to putting a tag on you that'll track you everywhere you go and could listen in on your conversation and also take a picture of whomever you're with? How many would agree to carry that technology if I could hand it to you? Would you agree to do that? I already do. You're carrying around a gadget that can track you where everybody's not. Yeah, can track you anywhere you go. So I'm going to talk about 5 technologies and kind of whiz through those to kind of keep us on track time-wise. But the couple things I want to talk about is genetics, because you have a great foothold there in the companies that you already have here. And the combination of your computer and IT capability with genetics is going to be phenomenal. You're going to be in the catbird seat. Now, the only competition, I shouldn't say only, one of the major competitions you're going to have is coming out of China. You're going to see China coming on really strong in genetics. They have determined that that's the future. They missed the first round with computer technology. They're not going to miss the next round. They're not going to miss the genetic round. Our healthcare initiative is smack dab spot on as far as what needs to happen next. Robotics scares the crap out of me, and I started out as a mechanical engineer. Anyone else worried about robotics besides me? Now, my concern is this, in that I think this country's falling behind in robotics. I think we're falling behind in Germany and Japan. Why is Japan building so many robots? Demographics. There's nobody to take care of them when they get old. How many countries are in the same boat that Japan's in? Lots of developing countries. What happens when you become affluent, you stop having babies. And so therefore, my understanding of the demographics for Westchester County, you forgot how to have babies. And so as a result, you have this demographic slide with this decline in the 0 to 9 population, right? You don't agree with that, do you? Anyway, so we have to watch for the robotics. Now what's happening is robotics are becoming smarter and smarter. So we take artificial intelligence and combine it with a robot. What do we get? A really smart robot. What happens with that? I mean, I don't want to scare you too far, but I just want you to be sensitive to what it's going to do across the board. I look at it in terms of promise and peril. I think it has great promise, and I think it has great peril. We're going to knock off the bottom 4 rungs on the employment ladder. You all talked about what was your first job. What happens when that job isn't there anymore, when a robot does that job? What does that mean to your kids? What does that mean to your children and your children's children when you don't have those bottom rungs in the ladder? What's really cool about the healthcare industry is that it has multiple ladders. It's one of those industries that you can start at various levels. It has employment opportunities for a broad range of people, and that's why it's such a cool strategy to go after. The Internet of Things. Anyone have a Nest thermostat at home? Nest thermostat? 1, 2, 3? Only 3 Nest thermostats to this whole crowd? My wife made me take ours out and put back in our clunk thermostat. Why did she do that? Nest thermostat, right? I could control my home from my cell phone. That's what my Nest thermostat, one of the features that it does. So I could sit here and change the temperature at home. I could turn on the air conditioner. I could turn up or down the heat. My wife didn't think much of that. It's sort of like having the remote control for the television, right? So I'm controlling the environment in our house from my cell phone. Good idea, sort of. Who bought Nest? Anyone know? Google bought Nest. Why would Google buy Nest? Because what is Nest doing also, in addition to allowing me to control my environment? It's collecting data, right? It's collecting massive amounts of data. It knows when I'm home. It knows when we leave. It has a motion detector. It knows when somebody's in the room. That's pretty interesting data to have, especially if I were a thief. I would be hacking into that system as fast as I could to find out when you're going to be gone, right? I'm going to come over and borrow a few things. So you get the idea that it comes with peril, too. Cool technology, fun stuff. I was all geeked about putting my Nest thermostat in, no problem. Then my wife says, number one, no. And then I thought, and I said, yes, ma'am. And my first strategy was, well, I'll just hide it in the basement, and I'll put the fake one back up here, and she can play with that one, right? I didn't do it. Anyway. Big data, that's kind of the world I live in. That's what my business is about, is predictive analytics, looking at data and what we can use and how we can use it to predict the future. We predict companies likely to relocate or expand, and also ones having a real estate requirement. You might like to know about that. 12 to 18 months before they have it. So 12 to 18 months in advance, we predict that behavior. And we do it looking at some variables that are very simple, and you can do it too. Change in leadership, change in ownership, new product announcement. I got into predicting corporate behavior by wondering a question. Why do companies do what they do? And I started wondering that 40 years ago, and I've been wondering it ever since. But they do things because something has changed inside the company or within their business environment. Merger and acquisition, change in leadership, change in technology, something has changed. And you can predict their behavior based on that because we look at those who've already done it and compare it to those who might. Connected is one other thing I want to talk a little about because I'm really quite concerned about your connectivity. And this is just me talking here. Where I live in Holland, Michigan, town of about 60,000 people, and I know we have the mayor here from Chattanooga, which I'm delighted to meet, by the way, because we're copying you. We just put in and not quite to the same degree you are, we're putting in a 1 gig fiber system that is a municipally owned system that is built around our municipal electric utility company, much like they did in Chattanooga. Our system right now is 1 gig fiber. It's going to light up. Currently, we have a pilot underway in our downtown. That will be expanded to the whole downtown before the end of the year, and then the entire city within 2 years, and then within the surrounding townships within the next 3. One of our townships took the lead and went out for a referendum for $8 million to put a 1 gig fiber into every home within that township. Now remember what's happening here, right? How many of you work at home part of the time? Part? Yeah. Maybe a third of you. All of us will eventually be working at home part of the time. My forecast, about 30% of us will work at home at least part of the time. So we're going to see more and more people working at home. And what does that mean? It means connectivity. If you wanted to move closer to New York City, you know how you could do that from here? High-speed broadband service, right? High-speed broadband service does away with distance. It's as though you're there. So if you look at that distance issue, you can reduce that distance. As Bill mentioned, we have an office in Kathmandu, Nepal. How on earth can a little tiny company like mine in Holland, Michigan, have an office in Kathmandu? Well, I had an intern who was Nepalese, wanted to go back and build schools, asked if he could work from there. I said, sure. He went back. He saw a need. We got busy after the recession. I said, you have friends? He had friends. We hired them. We needed a business incubator. He built one, put in a solar panel system and broadband, and now we have an office in Kathmandu, Nepal. Simple. And what we also have is access to some really, really bright people, PhD physicists, master's degree people, because our immigration laws will not let them be here. So connectivity, I'm saying it's a major issue, and if I were going to give you another homework assignment, it would be figure out connectivity, figure out how to do that countywide. Cybersecurity is, I don't know how many of you are aware that we have a cyber warfare center in San Antonio, Texas. Anyone aware of that? It was in Shreveport, Louisiana for a while. We spent $100 million building a cyber warfare center there. We have since moved it to San Antonio because it was under the Air Force in Shreveport. It needed to go under a 4-star command, so they moved it to Shreveport or to San Antonio, Texas, so it could be under a 4-star general. We're in the middle of a cyber war. Are you aware of that? We're smack dab in the middle of it. And right now, it's a draw. How many of you had your credit card stolen? I usually ask that question, I get about 40% have. If you haven't, you probably will. Clever strategies out there, right? Clever stuff that's coming down. My colleague got an email supposedly from me asking her to wire me money. Anyone had that happen yet? Yeah, right? So you see what's happening around us with the cybersecurity issue? The other scam, a friend of mine's mother had her pictures encrypted and they had to pay $1,500 to get them unencrypted, in Bitcoin, I might add. So They didn't think it was funny either. Actually, he had to go out and figure out how to find Bitcoins. And they paid it, by the way. And what about the hospital that had their medical records encrypted and held as ransom? You understand the concerns I have about cybersecurity, but on the flip side, what an opportunity, right? What an opportunity. Now, I've learned a little bit of disconnect here between IBM and Westchester County exists. But IBM is working on an artificial intelligence software that will recognize 85% of the scams. So there's a counter coming about, but at the moment, it is awful. And they're targeting small business. That's the interesting part. It's not the big business, because a small business, guys, we're easy. We don't have an IT staff. But there's a whole industry growing up now to support us. So right now, my email goes through a company in Pensacola, Florida, and all they do is cybersecurity stuff. And so your email now flows through a cybersecurity firm. So we're going to see more and more opportunities. That industry is growing at a tremendous pace, and you're close to where that industry can be. I'm going to have to skip forward a couple slides, and I apologize for doing that, so I'm going to pick up my pace. I saw Bill looking at his watch there. That means that my time is running out. I want to talk just a little about your economy. 87% of your companies here have fewer than 10 employees. 87% have fewer than 10 employees. You also have 595,000 jobs that have increased to 625,000 jobs from 2012 to 2013. However, you've had a loss of 6,000 businesses in that same time period. So just something to think about. The economic gap is the other piece I want to talk about. And this is the one that I think is driving a lot of the anger that we're seeing coming out in the election. This is the difference between productivity and the wage increases, which have been non-existent. So many of you know about this gap. And what it's producing is a lot of anger in the marketplace. I want to talk to you about another concern I have for you, which is how do you re-engage your major companies? I feel this real disconnect between your big players and what you're about as a community, and I think you need to figure out ways to re-engage them back in the community. I don't know what the answer is. It's easy to say what the problem is, but I see that as an issue. You're providing the housing, you're providing the homes, you're providing the communities for where their employees live, but I don't see them as a global company to even being connected to what happens to you. And so that's a concern I have. I want to talk just a moment about finance and security. One of the issues there. How many of you know what blockchain is? Anyone heard of blockchain? A few people have. Blockchain is really what's coming next. It's a secure way to transfer data. And one of the other things that's happening is data is being digitized, right? Data is digitized. And where all that leads and where blockchain leads us to is this will become your banker. Your banker will be on your phone, and it will be peer-to-peer banking. So I'll borrow money from a peer group, and I'll transfer funds peer-to-peer. Anyone remember Napster? Anyone remember Napster? What did Napster do to the music industry, right? Did it change the music industry? Like, only wipe it out, but besides that, did it change it? You bet. So keep an eye, and by the way, you have a world expert, and Madeline Swan is in New York City. She's the world expert on blockchain. You might want to make contact with her and have a little conversation about where blockchain's going and how this area might be able to take advantage of that. Talent, we've maintained a database of layoff notices. Last year there were 259,000 people laid off. That's 3,300 businesses. Manpower CEO says, we're going to have to educate and re-educate and re-engineer. And this gets back to this table right here from the community college that I spoke with earlier. They're smack dab in the driver's seat of what has to happen next. Continuous learning. We've got to get back to school and stay there. Environmental issues we've kind of talked about. Climate change, increasing weather issues, water becoming a global issue. Under the political side, I put the pitchforks down here. There's a great TED Talk about a billionaire talking to billionaires. And he's kind of warning the pitchforks are coming, guys, unless we figure this out. So you're laughing about it. Yes, the pitchforks are coming. So we want to figure that one out. Politically, there's a great book called The Accidental Superpower about the United States, how we're going to be the best game in town. We're seeing this huge inflow of capital from around the world because we're becoming the best game in town. And why are we? We have a large landmass of very productive soil. We have a great inner water system that lets us transport goods cheaply. And we're right next door to Mexico with a growing educated workforce, and we're going to pipe our natural gas down to them and give them cheap energy. Now think about what all that means in terms of a global superpower. We'll become that. Lastly, I'm going to talk just a moment about adapt or die. And I don't think it's adapt or die. That used to be what it was. It's not adapt or die anymore. It's anticipate or die. You got to get in front of where the puck's going. You can't be skating to where it is. You got to get in front of it. And I say that because this is what this conference is about. How do you figure out where it's going, and how do you get ahead of the game? This is Madeline, one of our two Papillons. Madeline is always on the lookout for opportunity, and that's really my message to you, is to kind of keep your eye looking forward and see where the opportunities are. We've talked a lot about concerns and threats and kind of doom and gloom stuff. Every one of those trends has an opportunity in it. Look for the opportunity for your community and your communities. Wrapping up, this is a test question. I was going to just give you this take-home test. But it's 3 futures. You know what those are? 2 kinds of trends. 4 drivers of change. What STEEP stands for. Those are the things that we've talked about today. And I really want to thank you again, and especially our host, the WCA, for putting this together. Bill, thank you. And the staff there have been dynamite to me, and Harrison has been just amazing to work with. So you've got some really classy people here to help you shape this county into the one that it could be. Thank you very much. Oh, questions? Oh, you don't have any questions, do you? Good. Any questions? We have mics if you like. Any comments? Anyone disagree with me? That's okay too. Yes, sir.
Just one comment about the birth rate. I observed working in the hospital that the birth rate dropped when the economy got bad. And that at every socioeconomic level, people just have fewer babies.
Wow, well, that's very interesting. Very good, interesting observation. I'm not sure can I get there? This one? Yes, to answer your question, there's some really interesting things happening in that area in terms of solar-powered grow farms, and not just for marijuana, but also for locally grown vegetables, so hydroponics. There's a lot of interesting things happening in that area, and I think you have some of them in this county that are happening. Yes, sir. Very cool. I'd like to know more about that, maybe after when we take a break today. Any others? Whoops, sorry. Well, the Research Triangle Park director, a longtime director there, was a friend of mine, and he was working on their 50-year plan when he left. And so 50-year window is what they were looking at for the Research Triangle Park. It was a 25-year plan when it was created. If you look at Columbus, Ohio, it's a 10-county regional economic development group, and in my opinion, one of the most effective in the country. And they set out 10 years ago with a 20-year plan to re-engineer their economy. And so there's a couple examples. Cincinnati, called Ready Cincinnati, is trying to do the same thing, rethink their economy and where it's at, restructure their economy into a new economy. So does that answer your question? Mm-hmm. I'll tell you the program. It comes out of the Purdue University. It's the Regional Development Center, and it's called Strategic Doing. And what Strategic Doing is, it brings groups together and asks them to think about 4 questions. The first question is, what could we do together? What should we do together? What will we do together? And when will we meet again? We had them come into our community and do that initiative. Out of that, 3 years ago, what came to us was our 1 gig fiber initiative came out of the table I was sitting at. Because at that table, we had the city manager, we had the director of the utility system, we had a couple bankers to help figure out how to pay for it. We had a couple other folks that were involved in the community structure, kind of behind the scenes people that made things happen. So to answer your question, it was really a combination of that round table, and as a result for us, we're going to have we now have a 1 gig fiber city. And we have a new municipal power plant being constructed. It's a 40-year plan. It's a 40-year power plant. So that's the kind of vision that our community has about itself. And there's others like that. I can go on. But who should be at the table? Everyone. And especially the people you don't agree with. And I say that because we become very bifurcated in how we go about doing things. We're separating ourselves. And I don't think it's really where we get the best result. It's listening to each other. It's connecting with each other. And that's what I was trying to do with your table. We need to connect with each other and figure out our common interest and not our differences. And so we'll all have differences, but we need to figure out what's common, what can we agree on, and what can we agree to do together, and how can we go about doing that going forward, to answer your question. And Ed Morrison is the director of the program. If you want to read an interesting blog, go to Ed's Garage, and he'll talk more about his whole idea of strategic doing. And he goes from city to city and region to region, teaching people how to do that. Other question? Yes, ma'am.
I work for an organization
Louder.
There's nonprofits are one of the engines in the economy here in Westchester. We study that by nonprofit Westchester and nonprofit university. Nonprofit jobs that have been created in the last few years. I'd be interested in hearing your views on nonprofits, and also just to follow up on your section or your point about corporations and IBM. Westchester has definitely seen the loss of major corporate citizens, as has Fairfield County, which is nearby, Connecticut County. And it really is a concern, certainly to the nonprofit world, but also, to residents overall. And what do you think that we can do is there anything we can do, or is it just all about stock price and shareholders when it comes to major corporations?
I wish I had the answer to your question. Maybe somebody else here does, but I've thought a lot about that question. How do you re-engage them? And I think it all gets back to people. What do people care about most? And I think recognizing people for their contributions, they're just people like us. Now, I know that they're driven by a global need to satisfy. I mean, if you look from a corporate point of view, their job, primary number one, is to satisfy their stockholders. That's what they're in business. That's what they're legally required to do. And so, but at the same time, if they can do that by making sure that the place where their people live, it will attract and keep the talent. I think the card to play is the talent card. This has to be the kind of place where people want to live in order for them to have the talent that they're going to need. And for that to happen, they have to get re-engaged in making it happen. The other one that I was talking with the folks from the community college about is we have to re-engage companies in doing training. They have to, the way it strikes me right now is most companies want to have the employees show up at the door and go to work and be productive instantly. That's the way it was. I don't know it's that way anymore. I think they have to be continuously trained, and you have to, as a company, be willing to spend the money to have them take a sabbatical and go learn something and come back and bring back what they've learned. So I think there's going to be quite a shift in education. You have a lot of silo education here, I'm told, and those silos have to figure out how to work together. Education has to become affordable. Hope College, where my wife works, is $30,000 a year to go. I mean, who can afford that? I mean, you come out of there $120,000 in the hole? I don't think so. And so you really look at affordability of college and what it's going to take. We've got to find a solution to that. But back to the corporate side, ask them. Ask them what it would take to have them recommit to the area. Where I live, by the way, there are 4,000 nonprofits. We did 3 TED conferences all around all around ideas worth sharing, all by our nonprofits. Anyone do a TEDx? Have you ever done a TEDx here? You might want to think about a TEDx conference for Westchester. It's a cool thing to do. We wanted to find out what we're really good at as an area. What we're really good at is compassion. And what I learned about doing that is we featured ideas about compassion that our nonprofits were doing as a TEDx. If you go to TEDx Makatawa, you can see our videos of our TED conference. Any other questions?
My question is, how do you address the issue of the so-called black swan, which basically happens in unforeseen events, like a 9/11, rising Islam fundamentally, which upends all of these,
You ask really hard questions. How do you anticipate a black swan? I think one of the answers to that question is know that it exists. Because I think if you go back to what happened in 2007 and 2008, I think most of us pretended black swans didn't exist. How do we discover black swans, right? We thought all swans were white. And all of a sudden, somebody, I think it was in Australia, saw a black swan. And then all of a sudden, we realized there's black swans. And so I think the same is know that there are black swans. And the other thing I would say about a black swan, statistically, it's going to happen. If you look at the bell curve, it's way out here at the tail end, but it's still there. And know that someday, sooner or later, a black swan's going to happen, and plan for it. Just know that it's going to happen. How many of you backed up all your data on a thumb drive and took it home with you last night? 2 days ago, right? Yeah. So backing up your data, that's a black swan. You don't know that you're going to get clobbered by it, by some cybersecurity issue. So plan for it. And I think there was one more question.
First, I am on the workforce board, so I think it's sort of the workforce issue and training. So I do agree with that. But it does a lot to corporate communities that again. But my initial comment was really about the artificial intelligence piece. My thought really is more important comment about the evolution of the workforce, because it's going to evolve from what I call as part kind of evolution. We went from a manual workforce to much more workforce. And now that we're going into the artificial intelligence piece, what is responding right, to those who are most of us as the intellectual workforce. What we do artificial intelligence. I think we're going to go into, especially probably and really what our humanity is that part. But what you're saying, I wonder though if we really are thinking about that remote workforce as much as we think about seeing it when a lot of companies are trying to pull back still on that remote workforce. Because I think we're starting to recognize that we need that connection. So I'm wondering if we're going to see as much of the remote workforce as going to see, or if we're
I think we should study poetry because my wife is a poet. And so I think we should learn the arts for that reason. But I would also say that what I see coming is the gig economy. And none of us will have a full-time job. We'll all be part of a menagerie of people with specific skills like Elance, and will be hired temporarily to do individual projects, and then we'll go off and do something else. There's a company in New York that specializes in going into a company and taking their projects and sending them out to a Elance kind of audience to gather up those people that can do that, and what they can't do, they automate the rest. So I think we're going to see a shift in how work gets done. Thank you very much.
Dean, thank you. Really great research and very thought-provoking comments. Really love that.